Oh my god, dude, did it not let up?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So due to the memory card failure that I mentioned in the previous video, I lost the beginning of this video that I had planned. So I'm just gonna kind of go over what you missed. It's gonna be kind of jumping around a little bit because of that, but I'll do my best to kind of just fill you in, and then we'll jump to what footage I do have. Yeah. So today's video is about full hydro steering and how to set it up, how to plumb it, what all everything does and why and what you need. So the kit that I went with was a full PSC kit. This is a full hydro double-ended ram PSC kit. It came in a big box with the orbital, the ram, the power steering cooler, all the hoses that you need, some tube, some heims to make your tie rods, and a reservoir. So all of that can be bought from PSC. It's pretty expensive. It's like $1,500 to $2,000 when you're done with it. Don't tell my girlfriend. But it really is the best in the business. If you want full hydro steering on anything, whether it's a Jeep or Toyota or something else, PSC, in my opinion, is the way to go. I know lots of guys that have Toyotas that do the trail gear stuff, and all of them seem to have headaches. And PSC is a proven name brand that you just want to run with. So to fill you in on what footage got lost, basically this is the ram. So this is what actually turns the tires. So as you can see, you bolt this to here, and that bolts to your knuckle, and that's what pushes these. This pushes back and forth and turns your tires. There's one for each side to run to the other tire. And then there's two hydraulic lines, one here and one here. Those go up to what's called an orbital, which is basically a replacement for your steering box that taps into your steering column. And then that pushes hydraulic fluid into this ram, which will turn your tires, kind of like a tractor and stuff. So it's the way to go. If you're running big tires at all, you will not be able to turn until you have some sort of hydro, whether that be hydro assist or full hydro. So a big question that a lot of newbies have is, why would you need full hydro? What's wrong with hydro assist? And the answer is, you don't really need full hydro unless you plan to push the axle so far forward that you can't have a physical connection to the steering box anymore. But as far as turning goes, hydro assist will feel very similar to full hydro. Both of them will be able to turn the big tires on the rocks just fine. So if you aren't running a super stretched wheelbase or your front end pushed really far out, you can buy a pre-tapped steering box from like Redhead or something and just run a hydro assist setup, or you can tap your stock box. There's lots of videos on that. I think you can even send it in to Bleep and Jeep and he'll do it for you. So there's lots of options. Hydro assist is great, but if you're like me and you're wanting to push your axle way further forward than it used to be, you can't have a connection to a steering box or anything anymore without moving the steering box also all the way forward on the frame. And on the ZJ specifically, you can't do that without relocating the radiator, which was a can of worms that I wasn't trying to get into. And the full hydro just makes it so much easier and simpler. So that's the difference between the two. So as far as mounting the ram goes, there's a ton of different options, okay? This mount right here is a Artec universal fit ram mount that I cut this hole out for the diff, and then I fit it up. It actually has this bridge that goes over the top right here, which A, protects the ram, and B, it keeps this from folding in, you know, if you hit a rock or something. There is a ton of gussets all the way through, as you can see. Like down in here, there's 3 or 4 of them that keep it from folding in. But still, if you hit something hard enough, I've seen guys bend these. So a bridge is a nice thing to have. But you can also just do them out of tube, run a tube, you know, with a bend across and mount it to that, or you can mount it to your truss. You can really mount especially a single-ended ram for like hydro assist or something, you can really mount that anywhere. With the dual-ended rams, the main thing is you want to keep this line from your knuckle to your ram as straight as possible. So you don't want this to be, you know, really maxed out either way. Otherwise the leverage is all wrong when this is trying to push on this. So if you can keep this as straight as possible, like you can see here, mine's pretty dang straight, then the leverage is going to be stronger and it's not going to be, you know, push on your heims as hard and stuff. And so you want to keep that as straight as possible. One other thing I want to mention is that due to how much tube I had left on this side of the axle, this ram mount is actually not centered in the axle. It's off towards this side. I don't remember exactly how much, but like a ½ inch or so, maybe more. And that was the only way I could do that, unless I wanted to trim the cast off of this axle, which I really did not want to do. So I have the ram mount pushed up against that cast as tight as it'll go. And then when it came to mounting the ram, I had two options. I could either center the ram in the ram mount, which is what I did, as you can see, or I could have off-centered the ram and had it centered in the axle, which then would have made my tie rods the same length. But I personally thought it would have looked silly when I had this bridge here, right, if the ram was off center. So what I chose to do instead was center the ram in the ram mount and then have different length tie rods. So it's kind of hard to see, but this one is about a ½ inch or so shorter than this one. I think when it's in the truck, you probably won't be able to tell unless I point it out. And if it's really obvious, I can always paint these black and no one's ever gonna notice. A lot of people do this, but so it doesn't matter how long your tie rods are, you know, as long as your ram is traveling the same distance on each side for your turning radius, then it doesn't matter where it's mounted. Alright, so it has been a week or two since the last full hydro steering little edition that I filmed. And the main reason for the pause was I was waiting for these heims to come in the mail. So if you remember me saying, you know, these are the heims that came with my steering kit, and they are a 3/4 inch bore of a heim. I'm not sure what size these heims are, but they're smaller than 7/8. But they're a 3/4 inch bore. And so I wanted to run 3/4 inch hardware. This is a 3/4 inch grade 8 volt, big daddy stuff, right? So I wanted to run this stuff this size of a bolt anyways, but as well as my knuckles are tapered, right, for a ball joint, and the bottom of the hole is already a 3/4 inch bore. So the top obviously isn't. You see the bolt doesn't fit in the top, but the bottom is. So if I ran a bolt any smaller than 3/4 of an inch and I drilled the top out, the bolt will be able to walk underneath here, and I didn't want that. I wanted this to be a nice tight fit all the way through. So between those two things, I needed to be able to run a 3/4 inch bolt. And like we talked about before, I can't do that with these and run a high misalignment spacer. So I wanted to run a high misalignment spacer so that way you can have all of the articulation in the joint so there's no binding. But you need to neck down the misalignment spacer. So if you look now, my new heims, A, they're a little bigger and beefier, which is always good, but B, it's a 7/8 bore necked down to a 3/4 inch bore on the heim, or on the misalignment spacer. So here's my other one. You can see I've got the 3/4 inch bolt, some big washers and stuff, and the misalignment spacers. So now I can go and went and bought a brand new drill bit. I can drill out the knuckles to 3/4 of an inch, slide these bolts in, and start to mock up my double shear high steer that I'm going to build. So for the high steer, I went and I got this also 3/4 inch plate. I wanted 1 inch, but they didn't have any, so I'm going to make this work. It should still be plenty strong. I'm going to use this, maybe plate it on top with some 1/8 inch or something, just to give it a little more beef and some style. And then I'm going to plate it all in afterwards. So cutting this isn't going to be very fun because I don't have a plasma cutter, so we're going to be using an angle grinder and just taking our time. But I'm going to be making my own high steer knuckles. So that's the next step. Step one of this process is I'm going to drill out the factory knuckles to the 3/4 inch bore. That way I can get the bolt through there and get the heim in there and start to mock up how high I want it. And then from there, once we have it all bolted on, I'm just going to use cardboard to build my mock plates, right, to see how I want the plates to be run. And then once I have that kind of looking how I want it, I'll take the cardboard, trace it out on the steel, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, so I got that drilled out. Drilling through thick stuff like that's never very fun by hand, but make it work. So now that I have that on there, you can kind of start to see what I'm shooting for here. I might want this heim a little higher. So what I need to do now is I need to get my ram mounted back in here, get my tube mocked up, and figure out how high I want this heim to be, right? I'm just gonna use washers to space it out for right now, and then I'll build some sort of a tube or something to weld in here for it to actually sit on. But so I need to get that mocked out, get the heim bolted on, and then we can build our high steer arm. So I could totally just run it like this, you know, with no high steer arm. That's actually exactly how my 44 was, you can see. And that's fine, but double shear is just so much stronger because it, let me loosen this just a little bit here. So I got that a little loose, and you can see how if I pull on this, the heim, right, it's gonna wanna move. And so even if it was double shear, even if the bolt was loose, there wouldn't be any wiggle to this, right? And so if this, even with this tight, over time, this is gonna oblong out because it's a single shear like that. Also, it's just so much stronger. It takes the force of this and distributes it into 2 loads like that. I mean, and then I'm gonna brace it all in. So if you can, double shear is always, always better. Yeah, so let me get the ram set back in there and we'll go from there. Alright, so I've got the ram mounted back in here, and I have it roughly centered. You can see the same amount of space on both sides. So now I need to get this knuckle as straight as possible. This isn't an exact science, but the reason for that is because I want to start to mock up where this heim needs to be height-wise. So when it's perfectly straight, in a perfect world, this bar would also be straight, right? You don't want it like this, you don't want it like this, you want it perfectly straight. And the reason for that, like I said earlier, is because as the steering moves throughout its travel, the height of this changes. And so if you, when it's straight, already have it pretty far down, when it's fully locked, it's gonna be really far down. And then when the ram is pushing on it, it's not pushing straight, you know, there's way more leverage here than there would be here. So when the wheels are straight, you want this tube to be as straight as possible. And there is a little bit of wiggle room there. You know, it's not that important. That's why we have these high misalignment spacers. But yeah, just try and get it as straight as possible. I'm just gonna use these washers to mock it up for right now. And once we have an idea of that, then I can cut this tube down and we can start to build our high steer arm. Hi, Justin. Okay, so I pretty much just took every washer that I had and shoved it on the bottom to get this high enough. And now if I hold the tie rod up, you can see it's pretty level. It does have a little bit of a downslope to it, but not bad at all. That's totally gonna work. And I like the height of where the heim's at, because you can imagine, right, the plate on the top for the high steer arm is gonna go right up here and butt up against this, which will give me a nice bevel to fill. With that 3/4 inch plate, you know, there's quite a bit that I'm gonna have to fill, so that'll be a nice spot for me to do that. So I really like that. I think that's the height that we're gonna run with. So the next step is I need to turn this to full lock. So depending on what axle you use, mine, the steering stops are on the front, but if they're on the back, then you would turn it all the way to the back, right? But mine, I can go like full Drift King status. So we're not gonna do that. We're gonna go full lock that way. And then we're gonna push the ram all the way into full lock, and then that's how we'll know how long this tube needs to be. So we'll do that now. Super accurate. All right, so we had it all together, and I started to cycle the steering here, and we noticed that it had a whole bunch of angle turned, which, you know, would be good, except for I'm a little worried about the tire hitting the link. And so I thought it was a lot more than it should have, so we straightened the wheel up and got to looking, and the ram with the wheel straight was way off center. And so that was a little bit of an unexpected turn of events there. So instead, what I've decided to do, because the first time around, remember, we went off the steering stop, I just turned the knuckle all the way to stop, and then I turned the ram all the way to stop, and then I built the tie rod off of that. So I suppose it's possible that the ram had a different range of throw to straight than, you know, my knuckle did. So I think what I'm gonna do instead is I'm going to get the knuckle as straight as I can. I'm gonna get the ram straight using a tape measure, and I'm gonna build the tie rod off of that. All right, so we have both of the tie rods on. Unfortunately, this one was not quite long enough, the tube that I had. You can see I've got it like tacked on with it pulled way out, and not a ton of thread engagement on the heims. So I'm not very happy with that. I am going to be buying more tube and replacing this with something that's like an inch longer. But it's okay for mock right now, so we're gonna keep going with it. The heims are just tacked on. So one other thing is I also took the tube that I cut off the other side, and it was pretty much the perfect height for a spacer that I needed. So rather than all those washers, I'm gonna use this tube right here, which is this tube right here, just cut down. So I'm gonna end up welding that around the knuckle here, and that'll be a nice solid thing to run the heim to. So the next step is to build the high steer arm. Like I said earlier, I'm gonna want it to butt right up against that like that. And then obviously it needs a hole drilled in it for the bolt. So I'm just gonna kind of use some cardboard for that and draw it out on some Sharpie, get it on here where I like it, and then we'll go and trace it onto the actual plate. So this is what I have so far. It's not perfect, it's not straight, and unfortunately I am gonna have to do a 2-piece high steer arm, which I'm not very excited about for 2 reasons. One, it's gonna be weaker, and 2, I have to cut through that 3/4 inch plate another time. But it was the only way to do it because, right, if this heim is sitting flat, and this was also sitting flat, it was sticking up way above the knuckle. And I really want the high steer arm to sit inside this edge right here so I can bevel it and have a nice piece to weld to. So I needed it to kind of slant down like that and twist a little bit, which is gonna be a bit of a pain to weld and blend, but I will figure it out, not a problem. And then I'll obviously come through here and trim this up so it fits and looks a little more even. And then once we have that plate done, we're gonna come through and build some gussets on the sides to make it nice and strong, and then this should be pretty beefy. Alright, so I got the makeshift high steer arm sitting back in here. It's all beveled, it's nice and thick, it's ready to be welded on. It doesn't look perfect, and I'm not stoked that this is 2 pieces, but it is what it is. You can see that twist that I was telling you about. So once I fill this, it's going to take multiple passes, and then I'm going to grind it smooth, so it's just going to look like it casually goes down. Yeah, and then once that's on, then I'm just going to build some side gussets, and pretty much done. Alright, it is the next day. So I didn't do a very good job of explaining it, but this knuckle is cast. So just like we did on the shave kits, I preheated this cast to like 350 to 400 degrees, and then I welded it, and then I did a post heat, and then we wrapped it in a weld blanket and let it cool overnight. And that's going to allow this weld to actually fuse. I could have gone even one step further and used the nickel rod that we used on the shave kits, but I just went ahead and MIG welded them, and they came out pretty good. This bottom channel is filled. This is like 3 or 4 passes on the inside, 2 passes on top, and then you can see here where these 2 plates were beveled and met. They're nice and ground smooth. You can hardly even tell. So I'm super happy with that. It came out great. This is super solid. All the spacing stayed nice and good. We did put an extra washer on the inside, and so when I welded and let it cool, it came down the extra washer space and everything was good. I welded that little spacer tube on the bottom of the knuckle here. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked with all that. The next step is to, I'm going to add some gussets. So I have this little piece that's going to go right there. And then I have this little piece that's going to go right here like that. And then this side is done. That should be pretty beefy. These ones I'm just going to do at 1/4, which is more than enough. And then we just got to somehow copy it to the other side. I still have all the cardboard pieces. We'll just bring them over to the other side, modify them if we need to. And yeah, making progress. Okay, so I've got this piece cut out. I didn't drill that hole. That was just in the scrap already. It kind of looks like a mouth of a fish or something. I might just fill that hole in. But it matches the lines of the knuckle pretty good here. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack that on. I also have this piece which goes on the inside as like a vertical gusset like that. And then this knuckle's pretty much done. I need to fully weld it out. I've got a nice little bevel there for the steering link. And just to make it aesthetically pretty. Then I just gotta copy it to the other side. All right, so it's been a few days. I've got this knuckle fully welded out. You can see the gusset on the inside. Looking pretty good. I'm really happy with how this came out. After I flap disked and blended these two pieces, they almost look like one. It's just got a nice little gradual slope to it. It's just got to be so much stronger than what was there before. So I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a great steering setup. And I went ahead and did the other side as well. So this side I still got to clean all of the weld off with the flap disc. But you can see how many passes, right? Each one of these joints was 3 or 4 passes because I had it beveled so much. So it's fully welded. It's not just a butt weld. It should be ridiculously strong. So pretty happy. Steering is pretty much done. I just got to work on the pump and the resi next and get it all plumbed up. What's going on, everybody? It's me from the future. So I'm editing this video, and there's a couple things that I wanted to discuss really quick that I didn't get to. So first of all, this thing's a monster. I took it on its first shakedown run. Oh my gosh, I can't wait for you guys to see this thing in action. However, I did end up actually ripping this whole high steer arm off the knuckle. So I had a couple people actually tell me that I should have stick welded these with that nickel rod just like we did the shave kits. And I kind of knew that. I just figured that these were a double shear. It was reinforcing the factory knuckle hole, so it wasn't going to be under that much pressure. And I was wrong. I mean, granted, I did hit a ditch at like 40 miles an hour, but so it was a pretty hard hit. It was actually hard enough that it ended up bending one of these ginormous 3/4 inch grade 8 bolts. So you can see how bent that is. And this is the bolt that runs vertically through here. So it was definitely a hard hit. But even still, I mean, I plan on jumping this thing at the dunes, which is going to be a hard hit as well. And there's going to be plenty more hard hits, or me, you know, getting this thing caught in a rock or something and the full hydro just doing its thing and ripping it off. So I did go ahead and pull it apart. I ground everything back down, cleaned it up, and we stick welded this with nickel rod. Shout out to Josh, my buddy. He came over and did that for me because, as everyone knows, I'm garbage at stick welding. So I'm pretty happy with that. It did the same thing it did with the shave kits, where it was way more obvious that it fused with the metal properly. So while I had it apart, I did address one other issue that I wanted to talk about, which was, I think the main reason the bolt bent was because I had the factory knuckle hole and the high steer arm were 3/4, and then I had that tube, this tube that's welded underneath here, right here, with just a washer on top. And so the gap between the two actual like shear points was really far. And so when it was pulling on it, it had too far, you know, if I would have had it clamped nice and tight on the heim, I don't think you would have ever been able to do this. So what I ended up doing was I took that piece of tube off and I drilled a 3/4 inch hole in a piece of 1/8 inch plate and welded it to the top in place of that washer. So now it's got a nice 3/4 inch tight hole on the high steer arm, through the heim, at the top of the tube, and then all the way through the factory knuckle to a nut on the bottom. And so now, you know, there's a shear point here, 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 and here. I don't think you're going to be bending this anymore. So I just wanted to go over that, and didn't want to lead anybody down the wrong path there. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. I didn't plan on making this full hydro thing into multiple videos, but turns out there's a lot to this, and I'm already at like the 25-minute mark or something crazy, so you're going to have to wait till the next video to see how all the plumbing and everything goes out and how it drives. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Oh, and check out our new website, shopbackyardbeaters.com. You can get your merch, your stickers. We got some sweet new hats coming in, so don't forget to check that out, and I'll see you in the next one.